Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Halloween is right around the corner. It's a time to think about ghosts and goblins and scary things. Well, it's the time of year that I think about Don Gray. Welcome to the show, Don.
Thank you for having me.
So how many books have you written so far?
So far I have a series of 7.
Right.
I have 3 of the Spirit series and 1 that just finished.
And they're all about strange things. Because that's how come when I say that I think about you on Halloween, it isn't that you're particularly scary, but you write about really strange topics.
I do, yes.
Right?
Paranormal.
And so would you consider yourself a strange person, or what is it about?
I do consider myself a strange person.
Well, we're in the same league.
The paranormal has always fascinated me.
Right.
Different aspects of it, witchcraft, ghosts, vampires, werewolves. The mythology of it is just fascinating to me.
Right. So when you think about Halloween, what do you think about? Because, you probably end up with little goblins showing up at your door, or...
I do. I have 3 goblins of my own that we take out trick-or-treating, and Halloween reminds me of my childhood and how my parents would dress up and go out trick-or-treating with us in the dark, being able to run around in the dark and just...
Okay, let's back up a little bit. Who is Don Gray? Are you a native of the Northeast Kingdom?
Well, I was born in Massachusetts. I grew up in Island Pond.
Right.
And we moved back down to Springfield, Mass when I was a teenager. And I decided that the best place for my children would be up here, because I believe here they have the ability to use their imagination, whereas in the city you're kind of constricted to... Right.
And you grew up in you lived in Island Pond.
I did.
And you said that was a haunted community, I believe you once told me.
I felt it was haunted, yes. The house we first moved into had some strange effects on me. I see shadows, hear voices, and it was a very restless time as far as being able to sleep.
Right. And you've written about Island Pond as well.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Did you mention Island Pond, or do you use it by name or just by a different name?
I use a different name.
What is Island Pond called in your books?
It's Wilton in Firestorm.
Right.
And Burke Flats in Malevolent Gateway.
Right. So what are your topics? All right, let's just say here, Spirit Firestorm. Tell me a little bit about that book.
The main character of the story is Samantha Ricketts. She's grown up in this small town in a haunted house, and she is able to hear spirits. Mm-hmm. Her father is strange, or he's a scientist of sorts that is obsessed with the paranormal. And she decides to move out of the house and not bother going back. And then one night she wakes up standing in the middle of a churchyard back home, and it takes her through a journey of finding out who she is and using what she can do to help herself, the spirit team, and the town to rid it of the malevolent spirits that's controlling it.
So is the character based on you in any way?
I don't believe so.
No.
No.
So how do you build your characters, or do you? Some people say the characters build themselves.
Yes, for me they do. The first chapter of Spirit Firestorm was a dream that I had. It was just maybe 5 minutes before I woke up, and the first chapter just rolled through, and I got up and I said, I have to write this. So I sat down and I wrote it, and I knew nothing of what was going on with the plot. I didn't know where it was going. I just sat and took time and wrote certain segments until it was a book, and then it developed into the military paranormal.
Which one was your first book?
Of all of them?
Yes.
It was titled Raven.
Right.
And it was about a 200-year-old vampire and a young woman who turned out to be the carrier of his soulmate. So she remembered his past, and they had to come together to save his life.
You know, as a writer myself, I'll sometimes look back at something I've written in a previous chapter of my life. Sometimes I look at my writing and I say, wow, that was really good. And other times I'll look at some of my writing and I'll say, and what was I thinking?
Yes.
Have you looked back at any of your books and just shook your head and thought, what was I smoking?
Yep, I do have one. It was my first completed novel.
Right.
That is not published because of that fact, because I'm sitting here going, what was I thinking? And it's very Anne Rice Interview with the Vampire style.
Right.
And there's no way that I'd ever publish it.
Right. Did you try to publish it?
I tried to edit it to make it more up to date, to kind of take things out and put things back in, and still no.
Right. I think that's important, though, because to be able to look back at your past, whether it's you as a person, as you as a writer, to look back and kind of chuckle about some of the things you've done and try to move forward from it. Because, you know, if you think you're perfect, you're never going to improve, because, as I said, I look back like 10 years. And sometimes I look back at it and I don't say it's horrible or it's great. It's just a different chapter of my life.
Right.
And as I age, I think I probably look at things a little bit different. But
yeah, I found that with that manuscript looking back, I used a lot of emotion that was going on at that point in time to write.
right.
So you could follow the storyline and its ups and downs, and it's hills and valleys, and go, okay, she was in a good mood then, horrible mood then, good mood then, wow, yeah, that dipped really low, you know.
So how do you get your ideas? You mentioned that you woke up and you remembered a dream. How do you get a lot of your ideas?
They just come to me with The Malevolent Gateway, the second book. I was driving home from Massachusetts with my kids, and I happened to drive under a street sign under a bridge that said Burke Flats on it, and I kind of got visions of what Burke Flats would be.
Right.
And it went from there. And then I found out that while writing it, one of the main characters in it, there's a place in St. Johnsbury that has a cemetery with this man's name in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I started researching that, and I do take from regular places.
Right.
I find that sometimes when I write, the places I'll be able to locate them afterwards.
Right. You know, one of my sons lives just a short walk from Stephen King's house, and you'll go by there and there's people always taking photos of his house. Have you had people yet clamoring to take a picture of your house because you're an author?
No, not yet.
You know, that's funny. You know, I say that tongue-in-cheek because if you're not a writer, everybody thinks that there's huge money and a lot of fame in it. Well, you know what? Let's be real.
Yeah.
There's very few Stephen Kings in the world.
Yes.
And I somehow doubt that I'll be one of them.
I'm hoping that, well, I don't believe I'll ever get to Stephen King's level. I mean, on Amazon, Malevolent Gateway did get to number 3 in its category, and Stephen King's Dr. Sleep was at number 1. So that thrilled me. I took screenshots of it. I put it in a frame. And
what about, there are success stories of people just coming out of nowhere, like Harry Potter. You know, she was a woman on public assistance, I understand, and now she's a multi-millionaire because of the Harry Potter fame. So we can, you know, I suppose we could all do it, but I'm not holding my breath that I'm going to do it.
Yep. I know that Spirit has been written for screenplay. There's been several interests. Sorry.
Did you inherit your imagination? Like, are either one of your parents a bit twisted or anything, or? And I say that nicely.
Not twisted in the way that I am. My mother is very much a craft person. She sews, she knits, she crochets, she paints. My brother draws. My sister's creative in her own way, but I just went with the paranormal and the writing.
What about your kids?
My daughter actually just completed her first sketch or rough draft of a comic book / book series that she wants to keep going with. My son is an artist, my middle one, and my oldest one he's very much the athletic and imaginative type.
Right. Good storyteller then?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, I think back to high school, people I went to school with, the ones with vivid imaginations, they could tell stories all day long. But so what are your next plans? Because you've written, how many books did you say?
7 in one series and 4 in this one so far. I have a 5th one that's started, so I'm going to be working on that.
Neil, is there one that you're really proud of more than the rest?
I'd have to say there's 2, because I'm very proud of Spirit Firestorm, and then the first book in my Vampire Legacy series, that one took me quite a while to start, and once I did start it, it turned into 7 different books.
You know, the one thing that I have noticed about you, especially on the internet, is I could sit down, I can write all day long. I consider myself the luckiest man alive. I love meeting people, I love writing, but I can't promote myself. I hate doing it, but you're everywhere. You're at book signings, you're at crafts fairs, you're at the fair, you're everywhere.
Yeah.
And you have to have that mindset, because you know, you can write all day long, but if you don't get out there and peddle it, you know, it's really not much use. But how do you have to make yourself do that, or do you love it?
On occasion, I have to make myself do it. There are times when it's like, okay, don't want to deal with this, push it aside, deal with other things. And then there's times when I get very excited about it. When Firestorm was able to be in Barnes & Noble, I made phone calls for weeks straight setting up a book signing tour. It took me up to Burlington, into New York, down to Connecticut, Massachusetts, and now we're looking to get it into Books A Million, so that'll take me into Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Maine. But it's very tiring to go on the tours. It
is, because actually I've gotten to be really sympathetic. Not that I'm like Toby Keith or something, or Todd Pronto, where they have to go on tour for long periods of time, but that must be exhausting, because, you know, after I've done a few book signings, it's like, okay, I want to go back to work now.
Yeah.
But on the other hand it's nice to hear some feedback, and you probably also come up with some ideas.
I do. I find that traveling does help with some ideas, especially if you catch little glimpses of something and it sticks. The only thing with tours that really get me is the fact that, you know, it's a lot of driving for me, but it's also a lot of traveling for my children, because they come with me, they go to see other family members. You know, they're on kind of my schedule during that time.
You know, even though your kids are very intelligent and they're probably well behaved, do they ever, when they're listening to you do a book signing, do they ever roll their eyes because they've heard the story 1,000 other times, like my kids did when they were growing up? Because they almost knew, even though I never do anything I do everything a bit different. You know, there's bits and pieces that are the same, and it's like, Dad, I'm really getting sick of that.
Actually, when I first started doing signings out in the bookstores, was bringing my oldest son with me, and he absolutely loved it. And he would get up, and if I was speaking to one person, he would present himself, you know, I'm her security guard, bodyguard, and he would explain the book to people. When Spirit came out, you know, we had gone up to Island Pond for a book signing, and while there, he was just going and going and going, and, you know, would tell people the stories and things that he had heard from me and what he knew about the book.
Boy, your son is not my
my other
children.
my other two could care less.
Actually, you know, talking about Island Pond, you also took a trip out to the Brunswick Springs out towards there, and tell the viewers a little bit about Brunswick Springs.
Well, the legend of Brunswick Springs is that, from what I understand, a young male Indian and his child were killed, and the mother cursed anyone who decided to profit off of the mineral springs that are out there. In the early 1930s, there were hotels built on the springs. The first one was started in 1860, and that one stayed for quite a while because he wasn't using the springs. He was just using the land. Somebody had bought, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but he bought the land and decided that he was going to see about profiting from these 6 different minerals that ran into the spring. Well, the hotel had burnt down, so he decided to build a bigger one. And in 1929, 2 months before the opening of his brand new hotel, it burnt down. And so he decided to build again. He wasn't going to be deterred by any kind of legend. He rebuilt, and in 1930, a month or 2 before it opened, it also burnt down. And the last time he built was 1931, using all of the same architecture. He almost finished it, or was almost done, and it caught fire yet again, and that was it. These 3 hotels never opened.
And what's there today?
There are, the mineral springs are there. It's protected land by the Abenaki. They own it as a protected land. You can see cellar holes of where the hotel actually stood. There are some ways where the paths were that people took, and there's stairways down to the springs, and you can overlook the river, and it's very peaceful and very beautiful up there.
Has that showed up in any of your write-ins yet?
No, not yet.
Now, let's go to Newport, though. I was once on a mockumentary. I don't know if you know what a mockumentary is. It was televised all around the world on one of these obscure networks. It was part documentary, where they took a hardcore look at the myth of, I call it the myth of Memphrey. But it was hardcore documentary, part of it, where they brought in experts. And the other side, you know, it was making fun of it. Right. So they intermeshed them. And have you studied Memphrey at all? Or, because do you believe that a dinosaur, like 30 feet long, lives in Lake Memphremagog?
I'm not sure. Right. I can't put anything past it. I've seen, you know, a lot of strange things have happened, but I'm maybe an eel, maybe something larger. It's awful cold with the lake freezing over.
Personally, I think it comes in a bottle. I think if you drink enough at the east side, I think if I drank enough, I would start seeing 30-foot creatures out there too.
I agree.
But the funniest one, I was going across the border, and they noticed I had a pitchfork in the back of my pickup truck. It was for a prop for the movie, And they asked me, "Why do you got a pitchfork?" I said, "Have you heard every story in the book from people crossing the border?" They said, "Oh, we've heard them all." I said, "All right, I got one for you." I said, "I'm actually going monster hunting right now." "You're going monster hunting?" I said, "That's it." He said, "Well, that's the first time I've heard that one." And we had a good chuckle about it, and he sent me on my way. But so you haven't dabbled in that phenomena yet?
I have started to research it.
Right.
I'm currently writing the next book in the series that has to do with almost a Newport style town, and I'm looking for the paranormal aspect of it. I've got the paranormal aspect started, but I'm like to tie in some mythology with it.
Well, you know what is, to be honest, you really ought to tie in and use Newport by name, though, because there's a lot happening in the Newport, in the greater Newport area. Like, as for myself, that's how come I write so much about Newport history, because Newport has such a rich history, and unfortunately, too often what you're getting is you're having Newport turned into a myth. So you'd be all set, because a lot of people who promote Newport, they actually are not promoting Newport. They're actually they're actually myth writers like you are. At least you acknowledge you're a myth writer. But some of them, they're promoting myths without even knowing it.
Right. I've looked into it, and I'm not positive of the, I don't want to say copyright regulations,
Right.
but any kind of legal aspect of actually using a specific place and naming it in a book.
Oh, I think you're totally. I don't know who would sue you. I think you're totally safe, but I'm no lawyer either. But I thought you were going to mention the monster, because as you probably know, is anybody who uses that name is
right. Yep. That was not part of the issue. I wasn't going to use the name of, but as far as the town, which is why the names are changed in the books,
right.
They do give the geology of the area.
Right.
So if you are from Island Pond, you'd be able to pick up on the bridge that goes over the railroad tracks.
Right.
If you lived out past Island Pond towards the Morgan Holland area where the second book is based, you'd be able to notice or recognize exactly where this takes place. And
Right.
And I have a friend who read it, and she's like, "I never want to drive by there again, ever."
Well, you know what I do is Howard Mosier, the author from Irisburg. Has been one of my biggest supporters, and I try to. He does fiction, but a lot of it's what he does is he interweaves history in with it. But then and so he's an outstanding writer, but I'm trying to read his work as history, and I'm thinking, no, that isn't the way, it was never meant to be. Have you had any writers around here who've really helped you out? Because like Howard Mosier, for those of us who really write about this area, he's helped out some of us a great deal. Have you had anybody for guidance?
I have not. Some of these books do have Indian
Right.
legends in it, and I've done extensive research on it. We have a gentleman that lives in town that he said if I had any questions, he's chief of one of the clans
Right.
out there, and if I had any questions about the legends,
Right.
that I could ask him.
So, all right, we only have about 5 more minutes left. If somebody wants to buy your books or learn more about them, how do they do it?
They can go to dawngrayauthor.com, all one word. It's not, you don't need to use capitalizer, but they are on Amazon.com. I do have them in Barnes & Noble, paperbacks and ebooks.
Right. Do you have any for sale local?
I do. Wood Knot Bookshop has them. I'm going to try to be at the junior high craft fair this year.
Right. You know, I went to my first craft fair last year. Not set up, but I had no idea how talented people were around here.
There's so many very talented people
Right.
in this area.
Right. We ought to have annual Christmas time book fair where we get all the authors together, because there's a lot of authors here. You know, some of them are like Ted Hoagland and Howard Mosier, who are nationally known. Then there's a lot of people like us who are trying to get our feet wet.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of us. I think it'd be great to have a book fair some year.
Yes, definitely. I met at the 4th of July celebration in Orleans. I met Elaine. She writes the book The Body and the Butter Churn.
Yeah, Elaine McGalis.
Yes, and phenomenal. She was just so sweet and so nice. And her books are based in Brownington, I believe.
Right. Yeah,
and she has 2 more that are out.
I envy you guys who can just keep pumping them out, though, because I have so many projects going, because I have to put out a monthly magazine, which, when I say I have to, I don't mean that I dread it, because I just absolutely love it.
Right. It's an obsession to have to do it.
But there's so many stories to be told. There's so many books to be written, and that's how come. You know, I hear about people say, "But I don't have anything to write about." No. Just open your eyes.
Yes.
Because you know, just the world is open to ideas.
Yep. And you know, you find time for something that you love. I'm a student at CCV. I'm a mother of 3, and I'm an author. Right. And you find time when you have something that is a passion.
So we only have about 2 minutes left. Looking into the future, what will you be on here next time talking about? Say in another year or so. What do you hope to have accomplished?
I hope to have a film in progress or completed. Like I said, there are interests in Firestorm as far as a film adaptation, and continue with the series and maybe start a new one.
Right. And you hope to be driving a BMW and...
I don't like BMWs.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather have a Mustang.
Well, I've understood that only really cool people drive Priuses, though.
I have heard that, yes.
Yes.
Yes. I know one in particular that he drives a really cool Prius.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I think this is your second time on here.
Yes. Yep.
And you've been on my radio show too.
Absolutely.
So we'll have to have you make an appearance there as well.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.